right, for the next hour, we're joined by the makers of A Noble Lie, Chris Emery and James Lane. Chris Emery, of course, was one of the producers, and James Lane's the director. And, of course, I'm in it. A lot of other, Jane Graham, who was a witness to what happened working in HUD, is in it. Terrence Yakee's mother, the police officer who found out the truth that they killed and tortured, is in it. Look, they're with us. I'm going to have them break it down. This is a short segment, long segment coming up. The reason it's important is there's no film made that's just about it, just about Oklahoma City in the last decade or so. And there's no film that's been modernly produced with all the latest info. And the gentlemen that we have on have been researching this for many, many years. I mean, I know that Chris Emery, I've been seeing him investigate this for at least, it's got to be close to a decade. So I think in this short segment, why is this important to you? You guys live in Oklahoma. How did you get started on it? And I think it's important to then break down what we really know about Oklahoma and then see if you agree with me. It's important to get this out now because people need to understand when they stage another one, they're going to use it against the good people in America. And exposing this may stop them from staging a new Oklahoma City. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Absolutely, Alex, and that's one thing that we saw with the underwear bomber. Kurt Haskell, in his first radio interview, said that he knew that there was something wrong with the official story of 9/11, and he was determined not to allow a cover-up to happen with the underwear bomber. So I think that that shows that we are having an effect, the entire, activist community in getting the message out and maybe stopping these events from happening. That's what's important about this documentary, A Noble Lie. We show the methodology that they use to cover up these events and use them to steer, the geopolitical ends. What you're going to get from this documentary is information, whether you know everything about the Oklahoma City bombing or nothing. You're going to walk away with something new because we cover the information that was garnered in the early years of the investigation from the Oklahoma Bombing Investigation Committee, and then we get further into it with the new information that's come out from Jesse Trinidad and his FOIA requests.
Continue.
Go ahead. One good perspective we got on this, Alex, is that here's a whole new generation that has literally grown up since the event happened. And they are the ones that the seeds are being planted on by the corrupt people such as Mr. Shapiro, our current administration, Eric Holder. These people wake up in the morning and have no compunction with lying about this case. It's just absolutely shocking and disgusting. What we want to do is present the generation that was living at the time and the new generation with the correct information so they can make sound decisions and realize, you know what, we're still being lied to about this case. And
that's why the truth's still important, almost 17 years after the fact. These people are still in positions of power today. They still have the ability to perpetrate another event like this. And this is what we're trying to hope for here with the movie, is to get some justice, the deserved administering of punishment to the people that were involved. That's why we chose the title, A Noble Lie. That's from Plato's The Republic. It's a lie told by the elite to maintain social harmony or the position of the elite. And that's what we see happen here, is that this, whether or not you think, whatever level you think that the federal government had it involved here, it is very obvious that there was a cover-up and they used this for their own political purposes. There was a great movement at that time against globalization. All of the agenda was completely stalled. You had patriots all over the country that were trying to restore the Constitution. There was legislation that was trying to be passed, anti-terrorism legislation. You cover that in the film. And all that was stalled. After the Oklahoma City bombing, if you mentioned anything about, restoring the Constitution or the fighting the expansion of the police state powers, now you're a McVeigh. It was used to silence everybody. And we see that as a precursor to 9/11 and the Patriot Act. This is a methodology that they use over and over again. And Oklahoma City, I think, is one of the best cases that we can use to expose their methodology because there's so many holes in the case. It's so easy to tear it apart. What we tried to do with this is boil it down to just the most provable essence.
All right, stay there. We're going to come back with the most provable essence. That was James Lane speaking. Chris Emery, the producer, with him. By the way, they got a great video connection with us. They're in their studio if you're a Prison Planet TV viewer, but for the radio listeners, we'll also post this, obviously, by this evening on the public YouTube channel. But it's so important to expose a noble lie, a globalist gambit against liberty to stop the Patriot counter-coup against their takeover. A Noble Lie, Oklahoma City, 1995. Without truth, there is no justice. VZ Lawton, Oklahoma City bombing survivor. And the film is just jam-packed with survivors and eyewitnesses. It really is the antidote to the lie. And if you order it by Sunday, we can guarantee that it'll be shipped out to you before Christmas, so you can give it as a gift or buy a couple copies, one for yourself and one to give friends and family. It is so important to support alternative media and filmmaking with all of this internet censorship coming in and the open announcements that they want to start shutting off the alternative media because we're becoming the dominant media. It is more important than ever that we go with the old-fashioned DVD and VHS and things like that to continue to get this information out to people, because as the system starts to try to clamp down on free speech, people are going to recognize it more. And the system's doing this because they're being exposed. The system is going in this direction because they're going to get in a lot of trouble if they don't. I mean, Corzine has been caught stealing billions of dollars. He's one of the top White House advisors, former governor in New Jersey, former head of Goldman Sachs. And the rats are leaving the sinking ship. His own people at the CME group are saying, no, he knew about it and gave the order. I'm not going to lie for him. And the media is trying to act like that news didn't come out 3 days ago. This is huge. Just like Fast and Furious. First, he said he didn't know about it. Then it turned out he was intimately involved in it. Now the media says, oh, he put a stop to it, though. The government shipping guns into Mexico to destabilize Mexico, but to also then blame the Second Amendment. And CBS News got those memos. A pure example of a false flag staged event. Now, I want to get into the film. I want to get into the crystallized key points that prove the official story is a fraud and there was a government cover-up and government involvement, elements of government. But I also want to parallel it to today with the Attorney General, who was the Deputy Attorney General, and we have his emails, thanks to lawsuits and FOIA requests, where he was saying, we got to cover this up. It's a D-Day operation. We've got to get in there and make sure the public doesn't find out what happened. And they did. I mean, you know, people like Terrence Yakey went bye-bye. So, again, joining us from Oklahoma are Chris Emery and James Lane, the director, of course, James Lane, and the producer, Chris Emery, who've really made a first-class, only modern film. There were some underground things that came out right after it happened that did a great job exposing, you know, the bombs in the building and the newscast. But it was always grainy, you know, 10th generation. They got the original footage. They got stuff I've never seen before. I mean, folks, it's not hype when I tell you A Noble Lie is a film you want to get. You want to have viewing parties. You want to give it to police, military, now, so that when the globalists stage this stuff, to blame returning veterans and others, because that's what they've built their force up for. People know what they're dealing with. And just like you were mentioning, James, the fact that with because the gentleman on the plane, Kurt Haskell, saw the underwear bomber being got on the plane and things, he made mental note, and his information turned out to be true, and the government had to admit they got the underwear bomber on the plane. And so now our people who are awake to false flag, we're everywhere. And that's really shaking the system up. Please continue.
Yes, and that's why it's important for, you know, your viewers and listeners to, you know, go to the Infowars Store to pick up this documentary, because it's going to show again the methodology that's been used to, you know, cover up these events and again steer us towards globalization. One thing that came out recently, you had Andrew Griffin on from Reddit Report. He was exposing that there's some internal documents that came out from Fusion Center that lists the okbombing.net website as a domestic terrorist website. Now, this was originally ran by the Oklahoma Bombing Investigation Committee and State Representative Charles Key. Now, when we see the NDAA bill being passed, you know, we wonder, okay, well, who are the American citizens that they're going to want to round up and detain indefinitely? Well, it's people that have the audacity to expose their corruption, because these institutions' primary goal above all else, above truth and justice, is self-preservation. You know, and I mean, this is a state representative that just was trying to get to, you know, uncover the truth.
And by the way, the federal document that we showed on air, if we can pull it up, State Fusion document, Homeland Security document says OKC investigators are terrorists. We can put the actual document up. That'll pull it up if you want to search it, viewers or listeners or my own team. You notice they give a brief description and they say, this group doesn't believe the official story. They're terrorists. And, of course, it's just a derelict website. He put the report out almost a decade ago, run by State Rep Charles Key, very upstanding with grand jurors and others that were there and knew what happened. General Parton, former head of Air Force Weapons Development. And so here they are telling cops, You investigate this and say it might not be what you were told. You're a terrorist. It's like people 3 weeks ago said, this can't be true. The government's going to secretly arrest citizens, and now it's admitted. But guys, break it down. You've got the floor.
Well, I think we should elaborate on the press, Alex, and what you brought up. Melissa Cleansing was the news director for Channel 4, KFOR in Oklahoma City, the morning of the bombing. And up to a year following the case, she said, and one of her famous quotes was, there's not one person in Oklahoma City that believes that Timothy McVeigh blew up the Emery building by himself. The New York Times swept in, bought out Channel 4. They did not renew the contract for the news director, and one of the top, I think one of the top beat reporters, Jana Davis, that actually investigated this case. That is a clear sign that the media does control the stories in the way they want to. They will literally go out and buy out a station or a newspaper. So if your listeners are in any doubt that that happens, it continues to happen. We've seen it firsthand right here in Oklahoma City. The blast pattern of the building clearly shows that there was contact charges. There are sources that came forward that we're going to elaborate on, that some were not included in the movie, that heard both the FBI and other law enforcement officers say, look, there were swabs, there were actually samples that were taken off of the columns that clearly show that there was C4 that dismantled those columns.
Yeah, we've got Brigadier General Parton interviewed in the documentary, and he did an excellent analysis saying that there had to be additional ordnance inside the building. He actually showed where they would have to be placed.
And he came and warned people at the time. When he saw it in the news, he saw the blast points on columns further away from columns that weren't damaged right up by the truck. You have the seismographs, the reports, the recordings, the ATF showing up seconds after, police being suspicious about it. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Exactly, and we've got witnesses, actual survivors from the building. I mean, who are you going to believe, the FEMA report or the actual survivors that were in the building? They said that the building was coming down 8 to 10 seconds before the truck bomb went off. I mean, to the point where the building was shaking and they thought it was an earthquake, and they had enough time to get under their desk, you know, before the glass
Jane
blew
Graham
in.
Heading up HUD, as you know, we've interviewed her. She's in your film. Jane Graham saw them the day before wiring the building, a bunch of feds, and thought it was telephone men. I mean, they were just all over the place doing it.
Yeah, and if the FEMA report says that that blast wave was traveling at 1,300 feet per second, you explain to me how the glass blows in, you know, and they've got 8 to 10 seconds before that to actually get under their desk. It's just nonsense. We've got a quote from Dr. Samuel Cohen, the inventor of the neutron bomb, saying that it doesn't matter how much ammonium nitrate and fuel oil was used, it would be against the laws of physics for it to create the blast pattern that it did. We've got an Eglin Air Force Base report. The Air Force reconstructed the event. They used the barrels, and they said that the gap between the barrels actually canceled out most of the blast and pushed it upwards. They created one single larger bomb, set it off to next to a weaker structure, and it did less damage. It was the final analysis from that report that there had to be additional ordnance inside the building.
And by the way, the ATF, when was it they blew up their Lone Rider truck to their own test? Right before?
It was in the months before in the deserts of New Mexico. That's correct. Almost identical.
I mean, these people are... And of course, Terrence Yakey, the police officer, knew that, but we know what happened to him.
That was very unfortunate. A year and 3 weeks after the bombing, he was found brutally murdered about a mile and a half from the front gate of the El Reno Penitentiary. That's 32 miles west of downtown Oklahoma City. He walked nearly a mile from his vehicle, and just multiple deep lacerations to the arms and the neck, rope burns on the neck, handcuff scars on the wrists. And they said that he shot himself next to a tree. Completely ludicrous. No investigation done in the case.
Just like Vince Foster. And, of course, what his last call was to his partner, though, that he'd gone to his storage shed to get, you know, the proof and that feds were following him.
That's correct.
It was actually, the death blow was a wound that came down from the top of his head through the bottom of his jaw at a distance far enough away not to leave powder burns, you know, and then his death is called a suicide. They don't do an autopsy, you know, and his family said that he wasn't suicidal. He was getting promotions. He was getting the key to the city. He had reconciled with his wife. He had everything to live for. And when they questioned that it was called a suicide, they said, well, you guys are paranoid. You watch too much television.
One thing that we found out from the county sheriffs in Canadian County, which is next to Oklahoma County, where Oklahoma City is, that these are people that Terrence went to kindergarten with, he went to high school with. They were sheriffs, deputies. They showed up at the scene where Terry's body was found, and they said that there were law enforcement personnel, both plainclothes and uniformed, turning over the crime scene with spade shovels, completely in the face of any tangible or any credible investigation. They did not do an autopsy.
They were literally mopping up the torture and murder scene.
It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible what they did.